This ad hoc committee meeting to order. We have a lot that needs to get done today with not a lot of time for this meeting anyway. We have, the city has a finance meeting here at 6:15. So normally we would say, wow, that's a lot of time, but probably not today. Anyway, a couple things that are happening. We've got some new numbers that came in from St. Croix EMS for their proposal, and we're going to need to talk with them about their numbers. I think there are some questions that people wanted to pose to Lakeview. I know that there were some requests for information that went out, and we're probably going to need to have them come up and explain everything that was requested. But before we get going, I also want to point out that in the past, we haven't actually encouraged people to comment as we proceeded, but we haven't discouraged them either. And I think that we've had a couple instances where people from the audience have asked us questions or made a statement. We made it clear today that we are seeking public input, but that input, this is not a public hearing, it's not citizen comments, so we're not asking people to just come up and say what they have on their mind. We want as was put out on the agenda, we want people to be interacting with us specific to the proposals themselves and the discussion that's going on today. So having said that, there is also room in the across the hall if we run out of chairs here and run out of room in the back. There's a live feed that's set up. We would ask that everybody in their comments be respectful of everybody here. We're not looking for any outbursts at all. We would say that if we have outbursts, people may be asked to leave. And comments or questions to us, we would like to limit to 3 minutes. Also, I just want to lay a couple ground rules. We know that St. Croix EMS and Lakeview save lives. That's their job. That's what they do. And so, unfortunately, that is not the topic here tonight. We just, by definition, know that everybody that is involved in EMS saves lives, and so any comments to that would not be necessarily targeted at the discussion that we're having. I've also put a call into Lakeview asking that they restrict from bringing anybody in to testify how they have saved lives. We need to try to save time and get work done here tonight. So let's just all agree that that's what EMS services do. They save lives by definition, and I think that we could all agree that St. Croix EMS and Lakeview do a very good job doing their job. So, any questions?
I had a couple of thoughts, if you don't mind.
Sure.
Over the weekend, I'd been thinking about something that I think is important for us to do now that we have a little bit more open public input, and just kind of going back to how did we get here. And so I kind of want to go over the history of how we got here with just laying out some of the basic facts. And I tried delineating it to just facts, not opinion. If you see anything that's at an issue or whatever with that, just feel free to speak up. So St. Croix EMS is set up as an enterprise fund. And enterprise funds are used to account for government's activities, which are similar to private business enterprises. Basically, because of the revenue coming in with St. Croix EMS, which fire and police do not have, we look at that income as paying for the operations of the service. Additionally, we also charge the taxpayer to pay for some of that service, and that was set up originally to cover capital improvements. Because our income does not cover all of our costs, we do allocate some of those tax dollars in order to keep the operation running, as the cost of operations do exceed the income coming in. Looking at projections over the course of the next 5 years, that's why we're discussing, or that's some of what is at issue. not all, but that is the financial aspect. So in early 2017, Hudson Hospital approached the city with an offer to take over our EMS services, and we went into contract negotiations, and because it's a contract negotiations, we went into closed sessions. At one point during the negotiations, the provider changed that aspect from Hudson Hospital to Lakeview doing the service. The contract negotiations continued, and these contract negotiation meetings were held in closed session. With a nearly fleshed out contract, we held a public hearing about whether to accept the contract with Lakeview or not. The District 3 alderperson at the time, Mr. McCormick, made the recommendation to have a third party come in and do a study on EMS. That motion did not receive a second and did not receive a vote. Instead, the City Council, myself included, made a recommendation to abandon contract negotiations with Lakeview and to form a committee to look at solutions. Late summer of 2017 to late spring of 2018-ish, an ad hoc committee was formed and included two current members of the council, Joyce Hall and Jim Weber, who spent that 10 months, along with other persons in the community. After about 10 months of a lot of investigation, a lot of reaching out to other communities, I got a sense that that recommendation from ad hoc was to perform a study at that point, is the decision that we sort of made. So at that point, I was newly appointed as the EMS Commission member from the council. And so I took the recommendation of doing a study by a third party, first to the EMS Commission. So idealistically, that commission was in favor of doing a study, but they did not agree to put money forth for doing that study. So I ended up approaching City Council at that point and said, look, the EMS Commission is not in favor of spending the money, but I think that we should be running a study. So that unanimously passed. Now, when that passed, and we went out for ad on that, several things happened in succession, right? The chief at the time resigned, the chief or the director of EMS resigned, and then shortly thereafter, the interim director was fired in a short period of time. So while this was happening, and one of my first EMS Commission meetings, the then chair of the EMS Commission stated that the town of Hudson was going to contract with Lakeview by January 1st, 2019. Obviously, being one of my first meetings at the EMS Commission, I was disheartened by this announcement, right? For more reasons, obviously, than just being one of my first meetings. So I was told unequivocally by that chair that it didn't really matter whether we let them out of the contract early or not as a city. They would, in fact, hold two contracts if necessary, and Lakeview would begin operations. So as a council, we voted to let the town of Hudson out of the contract early, knowing that decision did not have any bearing on whether town of Hudson would contract with Lakeview or not. It was more of a vote, at least from my vote, about the relationship with the town of Hudson. So with all of these developments, it was my recommendation in the early fall of 2018 to abandon moving forward with that study that I pitched to the rest of the council and that we voted on. Instead, with the upheaval of EMS leadership and the town of Hudson contracting with another service, it was my belief that we had two choices at this point. Number one, we needed to hire a chief externally from the service to come in. I saw this process and still see this process as about a 1.5-year process to get the service back on level ground. Or the second option is we request for a proposal from outside agencies to contract with the city of Hudson in part or in whole. And so I made that pitch to the rest of the council. That's how we voted, was to do this RFP. In that RFP, we received 4 proposals, with St. Croix EMS having 3 subsets of a proposal. We received from Lakes Regions, Lakeview, North Memorial, and St. Croix EMS. The first interview we had, so instead of just receiving the RFPs and really basing our decision off of what's on paper, we went through the additional step of forming this committee of the whole to interview each of the potential suitors, so to speak. So the first interview we had that day was with Lakes Regions EMS. We were told unequivocally in that meeting that they would not be able to provide service to our community without the transfers being in place at Hudson Hospital. The very next interview was from Lakeview, where they explained that they would now be the first call on all transfers out of Hudson Hospital. I believe Lakeview thought this was appropriate to take that action at that time to alleviate any questions throughout that process. My perception here is that that was not an action taken against St. Croix EMS as much as out of the process. So after that proposal came through, North Memorial came forth with a proposal that we dismissed at the next meeting, and this was solely based on the financial offering of North Memorial's proposal. St. Croix EMS presented a 3-part plan that increased, that one of them increased the charge to the end user and made the tax burden to our citizens 0. That was one option. The other option was to increase the charge to the end user and made the tax burden less. And then another option altogether was to potentially contract with New Richmond as part of a potential conglomeration of communities, which was subsequently dismissed. That last piece with New Richmond was subsequently dismissed for various reasons. And so we're really last looking at options for rate increases to the end user to offset the tax burden. And we sort of left that last meeting with numbers being reworked to which we were shown today earlier in an email, and we can kind of cover that next. So I don't know, I just wanted to kind of go through how we got here. I don't know if there's any thoughts, or did I misspeak anything?
It's not a committee of the whole, just to be, because we have members from other municipalities,
Gotcha.
just to correct that aspect of it.
Thank you.
And just one thing you did miss, that both the town of Troy and the village of North Hudson requested to get out of our contract as required by the contract, so it didn't roll every 5 years.
Right.
We're still under contract for 4 years, but we didn't know the state of St. Croix EMS. So we had to have an option, and we wanted to get out of the contract to see what would happen.
Thank you, Stan. Mm-hmm. I did miss that.
Anybody? All right, well, I think that, Jerry, I see you're here. We probably ought to start with the numbers that came in today. So why don't you come on up and present what you have.
You all have a copy from Finance? Did you get a copy of what we sent out today?
I guess that's what it is. Updated cover letter.
No, not everybody has it.
Put it up on the screen then?
Which attachment was there?
Is there anybody missing one?
I didn't bring my computer in yet. Could I get one, please?
Yeah,
Well, we
which-
can use one.
What's that?
You can use mine if you
I
want.
want one in color.
Oh.
Thanks.
Yeah, here, might as well give me that too, because there's so many, so many attachments this time, it was hard to find any of them.
Could I get a copy of the?
I would take one. Yeah. Thank you, Jerry. since you have them printed out already.
I got one. No.
This, the large one, up the right up.
Okay, that one's there.
I'm good.
All right. Can you make it bigger? Doesn't show very well on the screen. Yeah, actually, just leave it right there. That's good. All right. Well, first of all, thank you for the whole RFP process. I actually appreciated your summary. I knew some bits and pieces of that, but it's I really do believe, certainly the effort that I put into it, that there's been a lot of rigorous thought, a lot of rigorous feedback. I think it's an excellent way to actually kind of get from point A to point B when something changes in an organization. So I really feel like the feedback I've received from you, as well as from Josh and his organization, we've figured out different things that we might be able to do to address changes in interfacility transfers, down to Hudson changes, as well as the operation of SEMS itself. Last week, the finance group of the City of Hudson sent me a worksheet, which is really what that colorful spreadsheet really is. So that in the upper right-hand corner of the screen there on your spreadsheet, those are really the line items coming from the City of Hudson Finance Department, and I want to show you basically what edits I have made. The biggest one, Josh, I'll see if I can do this. No, this is not my laptop. I just want to bring this down. Let me see. Okay. Oh, yeah. There you go. Right here. All right. So what I want to highlight is this revenue right here, where it says total revenue. The 2018 budget is in column H, but the 2018 actuals are in column I. And then in column J, where it's $743,969, that was the City of Hudson's finance estimate in your current budget without an 80% increase. That reflects a 15% increase and your current $17 per capita subsidy. So if you look above, where it says 0 here in the brown, the worksheet did have $147,000. Excuse me for my cold. Did have $147,000 of additional revenue from that 80% increase. In this particular worksheet, we took that out to kind of see what if we did not increase to 80%. And the big change is, if you look at the personal services, which is in row 21, if you can see that. In the worksheet that we received from the City of Hudson Finance, which I've had since last fall, that budget was assuming all of the salaries, overtime, and health care if SEMS was at full staff as budgeted. In 2016, 17, and 18, they never were at full staff. In fact, in 2018, their actual personal services cost was $961,749. So I was talking with Josh, and we looked at the performance of that particular spend for salaries as opposed to a full staff. They still had excellent, close to 5-minute median response times, 10.5 minutes or 10.4 minutes, I think, in the 90 percentile. So what we are proposing is a 3% increase in that expenditure for personal services, less the 25% reduction in hours due to lack of Town of Hudson and interfacility transfers. And so, sorry if I had this turned off, so it's probably my watch. See if I can turn this off. Funny, you turn your phone off, but I guess I haven't figured out how to turn my watch off. So what that means, if we add the 990 and subtract the 68,000 from it, We're about $40,000 budgeted expense for 2019 compared to 2018. In reviewing that with Josh, you can see that has a dramatic impact, especially as we add 3% off of that number in the next 4 years. So the total over the course of the 5 years, we're saving close to $200,000 a year in the actual projected expenses, or roughly $1 million over the course of 5 years. So that's the biggest change that we've made. Otherwise, as you can see over here, what we've
Jerry,
done...
excuse me, can you
Go
go
ahead.
through that last part again? So I got the 3%, the 25%, but I wasn't following along in here where the numbers were that you were talking about.
Oh, I got you. If on your piece of paper, if you look at the last page, which is a reference from the worksheet that we received from finance,
Okay.
that number of personal services in the 2019 budget is
On the wrong page. This stuff through here.
He's right here.
if you were fully staffed, Mayor, that number would have been $1,186,363. So fully staffed, full health care benefits for everybody who might have taken it. That is about $196,000 higher than the actual numbers that we've experienced in the last 3 years. So that only changes from last fall till today is, if we do the projections based on what actually happened as opposed to fully staffed. What that means, there's a management change in a city council decision, is are you okay with not being at full staff? My recommendation is yes, because we haven't been at full staff for 3 years, and we have really excellent performance, and the workload is going down. So that's a decision point. I'm just sharing with you what the differences are in the financials.
I guess that's the first time I've heard anybody say that not being at full staff is an advantage.
I said not being at full staff. We have never been at full staff in 2016, 17, and 18. Yet SCMS has had excellent performance.
So yeah, I get that. Do you think that our mutual aid numbers went up?
I don't. Josh? Good question.
No, our mutual aid numbers have stayed the same over the past few years. I don't think.
So, well, I would expect that they would have stayed the same over the past few years because we weren't fully staffed over the past few years. But I mean, you're saying it's static, that we have not had to rely on mutual aid more because we're understaffed?
Correct.
Really? So when do we rely on mutual aid?
When?
Yeah.
When trucks are busy. It's not. It's got nothing to do with staffing. I mean, a lot of it's got to do with busy in time of calls and when the calls are coming in. And
Boy, that's not making sense to me. But I'll agree with your assessment of that. But I'd love to see numbers on that to say that the only times that we went to mutual aid it had nothing to do with not being fully staffed. In fact, I know that's not true. I know absolutely that's not true.
you can say what you want, but
Well, I know that when we went for a period of time without an ambulance, that we had to make mutual aid calls. That absolutely had to do with being understaffed.
Yeah, I never excluded that being understaffed was a reason for mutual aid. Majority of mutual aid that we call for is because our trucks that are working are busy.
All right. So we would agree then that we have made mutual aid calls because we were understaffed.
Correct.
Okay.
As far as a number, I can't tell you a number off the top of my head, no.
Okay. Okay.
Can I ask? Go ahead.
Can either of you explain why all of a sudden we've had these numbers, now why all of a sudden is there this change in these numbers to the positive in relation to St. Croix EMS?
It revolves around this particular discussion.
Yeah.
From the beginning until now, we've basically assumed that we would budget to be fully staffed based on the proposal. Once I realized that you have never really been fully staffed, I put together a proposal. What would happen if you staffed at the level that you've done historically, as opposed to a staffing level that you had actually hoped or planned for.
Jerry, therein lies a point of contention and an issue
Yeah.
of being fully staffed, and I don't know if that's what you were alluding to. Why wouldn't you give us a proposal that has 100% staffed, not at our current levels?
The answer to that is when we did the analysis and looked at how much staffing has been provided over the course of the entire year in 2018 as well as 17 and 16 is substantially more than what we believe from the other RFP proposals that they were offering. It's substantially more man hours and a larger staff than what the other proposals were. So
But you're not giving us a true picture.
Okay.
You understand what I'm saying?
No, but go ahead.
If you're just doing, we need to be 100% staff,
All right.
contractually and otherwise, okay? So why wouldn't you give us a funding model with 100% and not whatever percentage this is?
Well, I think that what I was suggesting is get based on the performance of 2018. The real question is the city council happy with the performance of the response times and their ability to work with mutual aid? I think perhaps, and this is an outsider looking in, I'm not really here on a day-to-day basis. From the outside looking in, I think the difference really is that when it comes to something that's an emergency service, it really is all about the peaks and valleys. It's really there's nothing really level about it at all. So even if I could be frank, even if you staffed at twice the level, would you actually get a substantially better performance? Because you really are kind of dealing with everything's just great until you have two trucks in the same place at the same time.
Well, correct me if I'm wrong, but if I'm going to my boss with a budget
Yep.
for the next 5 years, and I only give him 80% of what is projected, I probably would be in somewhat of trouble,
Right?
instead of not giving him a budget of 100%.
Right. Well, I think maybe, and I hope I'm not come across argumentative, because that's not
No,
my
no,
intent.
I'm just
But perhaps, when I look at almost any other business outside of something that's emergency, almost all businesses, that provide a service have a peaks and valleys. A hospitality business, you're really busy, during happy hours or certain days. You're really busy on weekends, you're not so busy. That's more predictable than I think when it comes to emergency care. If I can be frank, I actually think the real benefit is having multiple trucks, staffing to a budget as opposed to full staff. That's really what we're proposing, and take advantage of your on-call opportunities. The key is you can't take advantage of an on-call opportunity unless you actually still had the vehicles. It seems to me that the competitive offerings really were offering, a truck on the street. They're really not having 2 or 3 vehicles available. So imagine that it's in this proposal that we're staffing 1 truck 24 hours a day, a second truck 12 hours a day, and you get 2 calls in that particular time. You have 2 choices, either on-call or mutual aid. What we've done is looking back through the history, just like in the hospitality business, we believe you can fairly predict where are the really slow periods and really where are the peak periods. My argument is even in those slow periods, you still can have 2 and 3 calls at the same time.
Sure.
Okay.
So, well,
I got
ask
a
a
question
couple
for, I'm
Yeah.
sorry, for Josh, actually. As we're talking about this, we're talking about staffing levels. Can you give us a little more color around what being short-staffed looks like? I mean, are we ever without a truck? Are we down to 1 truck with an on-call team ready to go on backup? Can you give us a little?
If we're short staffing, it means we only have 1 truck. We're set up right now to staff 2 trucks 24/7. But if we are short, then then we have 1 truck that's 24/7.
Gotcha. Can you give any kind of percentage about how much that's happening?
I mean, I think
Over the course of, I know I'm putting you on the spot here.
Last month we're probably 85%. I mean, 80, somewhere in the 80, 85, 90%.
Okay.
what was that, staffing?
Correct.
Okay.
So
And that
the
would affect.
definition, so the definition of fully staffed changes. I mean, for example, we're operating right now under a policy that fully staffed means we have 2 trucks 24/7.
Correct.
We could change that policy and say, well, due to the lack of transfers potentially coming up and we lost the town, that fully staffed definition would be one truck 24/7, another truck 12 hours a day.
Correct, we'd have to change the model.
So we changed the definition of what is fully staffed.
Correct.
Okay. So when we say we haven't been fully staffed, that's not that we haven't had the ability to answer a call at that moment. It just means we didn't have two trucks.
And I wouldn't say fully staffed. We've been able to, since January 1, we've handled all 911 calls that we have, so it's not a
No
staffing
mutual aid
issue.
so far?
No, a couple times, but that's due to other calls, not due to staffing.
Okay.
You're correct.
I just wanted to clarify that,
That is
so-
our position.
I don't see that he's not providing us with something, he's just asking us to change our definition of fully staffed. If it suits our needs, why would we spend more money on staff than would,
That's a good
that would
question.
be necessary?
That's a really good question.
Can I ask you a couple of questions, Harry?
Sure.
So, part of this, and I just got this, I just read this at 3:30 today, so I felt like it was really 11th hour, I just have to say that.
Right.
I see a couple of wishful thinking pieces in here, I just want to point this out. So, one of them is regarding the interfacility transfers. The proposal here says, or the summary, I should say, the proposal says, encourage patients within the community to use St. Croix EMS for interfacility transfers as a show of support to keep St. Croix EMS in the city of Hudson. I mean, I guess what I'm trying to say, is that realistic? Is it, if that's part of the financial thing we're leaning on, it feels very shaky to me. There might be some patients that do that, and I know there's nothing in Wisconsin state law, and I understand that would prohibit somebody from asking for that, but that seems a little wishful thinking.
Well, some of it's that, the other portion is we know we're gonna get some transfers.
Yep.
So,
Okay.
I mean, a lot, that's what boils down into that number too.
Yep.
And that's not, that's transfers out of Westfields or River Falls or Baldwin or,
Okay.
whoever calls. That's not just excluding, just.
No, and I
Hudson
get
in
that.
general.
Anytime, no, I get that. Anytime we get a transfer, it would help. I understand that. The second part, and this is more for our reps from the other cities, what this calls for is a continuing per capita subsidy of $17 through 2022 for the municipal partners, and then a $17 per capita for the city of Hudson through 2023. So I guess my question for you guys is that what you're looking for? Does that sound like something you'd be willing to do? That type of thing.
As far as the contract,
Well, as far as,
contract runs until 2022. That's what we have.
right, so this would be saying that you would be in the contract till 2022. My understanding is you guys have, I know you've been trying to get out of the contract, right, so.
We have asked to be let out early, yes, we have, and then the city council said no, and so we're here until 2022, and it's up to the council.
I believe actually the most recent was that we weren't making a decision until the end of first quarter of 2019. I don't think we gave you a definitive,
Well, it was whenever, and that's what we said, whenever you're ready to make a decision,
wanted to-
then we'll be ready to take an act or make an action on that.
Could I make
I
a,
think-
go ahead.
The difference perhaps from the situation before was this plan is fixing the per capita at 17. The other plans we've talked about, and the reason why the towns have gotten pretty antsy, is that we were showing it going over $30 per capita. That's my understanding. That was the thing that said we can't do this anymore from the town's viewpoint. Am I
We had
correct
no
in that?
idea. Those numbers were just projected at the
Right.
level, or the numbers we were getting at that time. We had no idea that 30 was going to be enough, or it would be 40 or whatever.
Exactly. So
That's
what Paul is saying is, if this would $17 on a steady line through 2022, is that acceptable? Is that viable in your budget?
Well, it is for this year. I won't know next year's budget until we start looking at the numbers.
It's saying there would be no change. That's not going to go up or down. It's going to be steady, as opposed to being it has been projected. We had a projection of it continuing to rise over the next 5 years as we changed our staffing model.
I don't know of any costs or for anything that's staying steady. Everything is increasing, whether it's wages for the staff.
Sure,
We had
sure.
trouble last year getting people because we couldn't pay enough, and that comes up all the time. We can't pay enough. So, you know, I mean, if these numbers stay, are you going to include raises and stuff like that? I mean,
Well, that's the question, but that's a different question. I'm just asking about, and Paul was asking about their model that they're proposing today. Is that even worth talking about? If we can hold the per capita at $17, is that acceptable? We're looking at for the next 4 years.
well, if it's $17 rather than zero, I mean, you know, for the same kind of service, I would have to, you know, say that I would rather have the users pay rather than people that don't use the service.
Can I make,
So it doesn't make any difference.
What's that?
It doesn't make any difference to you whether it was a per capita charge or not.
Well, it does make a difference
If
to
there's
my
any per capita
budget.
charge, you don't want to do it.
What's that?
If there's any per capita charge, you don't want to, you want the model, you want to shift all the cost to the user.
Correct.
if I could,
So the government of the city is no longer willing to spread that cost across your entire village.
Say that again?
You're not willing to spread the entire $17 per capita across the entire village. You want the users to pay all that expense.
Well, the users pay through their insurance and whatever. So this is proposing an increase to the users if we stay with St. Croix EMS. You know, the Lakeview model doesn't include any increases like that they're going 8% a year or whatever.
There's nothing in there about any of this proposal about increases or lack of increases on their part that I've seen. We've got no
From St.
guarantee
Croix EMS?
from Lakeview. There's no guarantee. Have we seen a pro forma budget on what the costs are going to be? I'm not aware of that.
What?
So
what-
you're saying
What does that budget have to do with us? That's their business. If they're not billing the city, I don't understand.
You were implying, I infer, that you were implying that their costs were not to the end user were not going to go up.
No, I didn't say that. This is guaranteed 8%.
Sure.
They might go up 1%. You know, if they go up, you know, the rate of inflation.
And we can expect, so that's not any different than what's going to happen with Lakeview. Their costs are going to go up
Right.
every year as well. So, you know, just from your statements. So just don't make that a,
Again, this is the city council's decision. It's not mine.
no, but you're at this point, you're still one of the partners, and we are interested in you continue to be a partner. We think that's valuable. So where your position is important to us to understand.
Yeah, so like I said, I mean, Lakeview's proposal, just, you know, St. Croix EMS is great, like Rich did to start the meeting out. They're both in the business to save lives.
Right.
And they're both nonprofits, you know, so they're in the business to save lives. It doesn't do them any good, you know, for your business plan if you're not getting to the patients as fast as you can.
Okay.
now can I say?
Go ahead.
I'm going to make a suggestion that we let the presentation pass its course, because I want to, we all got this late, and I think that if he walks us through step by step to understand more fully what we're looking at and what they're proposing, and then ask questions, maybe even, you know, as he gets to that topic. For example, a couple of the questions that you already asked, Paul, we're kind of jumping ahead. If we could structure this first part where we're really all getting on the same page with this proposal, I think that might be a good methodology for the start of this meeting.
Yeah, I'm sorry if I got off course. I was just really curious about what the other communities were thinking, so.
Thank you. Let's do that. Let's just go to that first page and start in the upper left-hand corner. Basically, what I've summarized is that I did change the personnel services expenses from the previous budgets down to 3% above the 2018 actual. Our thinking there, relative to the questions that came up today, we still believe that the amount of man-hours that would be devoted to the City of Hudson and its partners is substantially higher than what the competitors were. So on an apples to apples, we feel that that's the advantage, and I think that's what our mayor was asking the first time. We thought not full staff would be an advantage. Yes?
A question on the 2018 actuals. So For the first, until, correct me if I'm wrong, October, we were staffing EMTs when they were in-house. They weren't able to capture more hours. And now we've gone back to the model that we were at before. Is that an increase to be able to do that? To go back to the model that we were at before, where you have somebody wear a pager, they don't have to be in building?
No, it's not an increase. I don't believe so.
That would be easy to look at January and February figures and.
Josh, may I ask, I'm having a hard time hearing you when you're speaking, if you just speak up a little bit. Josh.
Okay.
I got your answer, but
Yep,
if you
that's
could
fine.
speak up
Okay.
going forward, I'd appreciate it.
So from a budgetary standpoint, in 2017, there was about, let's say, $350,000 assigned to EMTs because we were being paid a stipend and they weren't required to be here. They were working, say, more hours, but they were able to work more hours because they weren't restricted. Where in 2018, we went to the hourly. So the budget was dropped by about $125,000 because we knew there would be a limitation on how many hours they could work because of benefits. Because we wanted to keep them under a certain threshold. 2019, we've gone back to the stipend model. So when we did the budget, we put the part-time EMT costs back up to where they were in 2017. So that's really that's about $125,000. So that's really the difference between what you're seeing in the budget and what they're proposing. Is because from a budgetary standpoint, we said, well, if we're going back to the stipend model and the individual EMTs individually can work more hours. So that's what the difference is.
So, wow. So
it's budgeted. Again, I mean, that's the important thing. If we were fully staffed, that's what we budget on. It's no different than any of the other departments. We assume that we're going to be fully staffed. We make assumptions, not that it impacts the EMTs, but like if we're adding a position, we budget it at family health insurance because we don't know. So we need to take the most conservative approach. So that's really the difference between the numbers.
Fully staffed meaning 2 ambulances versus 1.5.
Right. There's two adjustments there.
I just
There's
wanted
the
to clarify.
adjustment, and then the line right below that is adjusting for going down to 1.5 ambulances. So the line where it says, where he has a 3% annual increase from actual, that's where we're talking about this difference between what we budgeted in their proposal, that they're just going to use last year's cost and add 3%. The line below that reflects the fact that we're going to have one less ambulance 12 hours a day. So there's actually two adjustments to reduce the expenditures. Does that make sense? So there's 2 separate lines that impact that number. And the number with the 25% reduction in hours, we've gone back and forth, Jerry and I, several times, and those I think accurately reflect. They had a higher number to start, but then that didn't take into account that your admin staff is still going to be full. You're not cutting a quarter of your admin staff. They're still going to be working full time. So that's the difference. Essentially, there's about $125,000 in the budget between what we budgeted and what you're seeing here is because we assume the cost would be the same, fully staffed as they were in 17 under the same model.
So if I heard this right, we reduced the budget for 2018 based upon an hourly model that was brought to us by Brandon. That didn't work out because we couldn't get full staffing. So we went back to the stipend and we budgeted more money for the stipend. And now we're coming back and saying that we can fall back to the staffing that we had before when we budgeted less money. So are we going back to hourly? Why not?
I can't.
I'm asking Josh, I guess right now he's shaking his head. Why not?
Because it puts it puts hour requirements on the EMTs. They can only work 24 hours a week. And we just don't have the pool of EMTs right now.
But we're reducing the staff.
Right, but that still takes more employees to do, the same that.
but we're coming in, you're making the statement that we were able to operate with, at whatever the numbers were, 60, 70% staffing last year. I'm not following this. This isn't following for me. If you're saying that we're going to reduce or change the definition of fully staffed based upon our past experience, then why aren't we using that past experience then also to budget and to go back to hourly? We're using it past experience for one reason, but not for the other. Now you're saying it worked.
I think the short answer to that, I think that is really the heart of our discussion, is our workload has gone down. I mean, if you still had all of the town of Hudson work and all of the interfacility transfers, this would be a great discussion, and we actually should increase the budget from the 2018 actuals. What we're trying to figure out is, can we really actually address the fact that the workload went down, and can you really continue to afford to be at fully staffed when close to 25% of the runs are gone away? We went from 1,600 to 1,100 runs, 1,600 runs in 2018 down to 1,100. So we believe we have rationalized, I hope that's not too much of an MBA, but we've simply rationalized that at 1,600 you should have X level of staffing, which you actually never really achieved. I think the numbers were about 82% of fully staffed was the average for 2018.
Well, but that was based upon Brandon pulling 4,000 hours in 16,
Yes.
6,000 hours in 17, and up to 3,700 hours up to the point that he left us for 18.
Yeah.
So, I mean, otherwise, without that, we were at like 60%.
Oh, okay. Is that right? 60?
Probably, yeah.
All right. The real issue, I think, is we've gone from about 1,600 runs to budgeted 1,142. And so now that's what we're trying to do, is rationalize what should be the head count. How much staffing do you really need for 1,142 versus 1,600? I'm not a policy guy. We just want to say this was what the rationale was, right?
Would it be possible, I'm just trying to get a handle on this, because we have several moving targets. Fully staffed can be 2 trucks 24/7, or we can change the definition, which it seems like we have, to 1 truck 24/7, 1 truck 12.
Right.
So when we say we're not fully staffed, that's not really true. We're changing that definition. So, but then there's the stipend versus hourly. So would it be possible or smart for us to look at our new definition and put the numbers in that using 2 columns? One says stipend and the other says hourly, and then do what's best.
I think that's absolutely what needs to happen on a quarterly basis or a monthly basis, to really look at what were the actual staffing in the last month or two. And in a good operation, this is a moving target. There's nothing really static, I think, about staffing. My point is exactly what you were saying. Any opportunity, and that's really what a continuous improvement program is about, is how are we running today? How could we take $10,000 or $3,000 a month cost out of our operation? Every opportunity should be on the table, and that's really what this particular proposal is. We call them opportunities, not hopeful thinking. Without any of those opportunities ever being successful, assume 100% failure, we still end up with about $245,000 in the reserve cash fund. It's not what we want. We'd like to keep it at the $600,000 or $700,000. But the idea is I think you're right on the money about this. The idea is, instead of talking about full staffing and looking at those numbers, look at response times and performance, and then expect the ambulance chief to actually manage the number of hours to that $920,000. That's really what I'm proposing, is have that ambulance chief or who's ever in charge really manage the number of hours to that. That means they go over budget, when for whatever reason we're having heat waves and heat strokes or blizzards and broken hips, and shrink it at every possible time. So we really have an opportunity to increase and decrease staffing. I think where we have an advantage is the fact that we already have a sunk cost of 3 trucks. 2 trucks, right? We have an advantage of 2 trucks. That means one's fully staffed, one's running at halftime, but the other half the time they still have the ability for either mutual aid, which is our second choice, on-call will be our first choice. But if it's a heart attack, obviously mutual aid would be a lot faster than on-call. So you mentioned something about interfacility.
But isn't on-call what we're dealing with right now? I mean, isn't that what we're doing with only a half of an ambulance? We're eliminating on-call for 12 hours.
No, on-call is on-call. It just means you're not paying somebody 12 hours of
Yeah, but
salary.
that's what we do.
That's what you do now.
Yeah, our people are on call and we're paying them for being on call.
Are you on call for 12 hours?
Yep, but the other 12 hours of the truck and a half would be, an all-call.
All-call.
So whoever's available that has their pager on is listening will come
Yeah.
down for that.
Thank you.
So let me-
All-call, not on-call. Thank you.
So how does this impact our staffing relative to what you would consider fully staffed for paramedics, Josh? Are we still focusing on 5 full-time paramedics?
I don't think so, no.
And what are we at right now?
3.
3, and what would be the optimum number for this new proposal?
I wouldn't go any less than 3 full-time.
And
We'll have to beef up our
but I mean,
part-time
as far
or
as
casual.
so we know what our personnel costs are going to be. What do you think your target is?
For number of full-time,
You're right.
3 for right now.
For this budget, but maybe more for the next budget.
Well, 2019's budget's already set at 5, so.
Oh, okay, good point.
As far as 2020, like I've told a bunch of you, 2019 is going to be a play around year. This is stuff that we've never encountered before. We've never done transfers. We have not covered the town of Hudson. It's going to be a play around with the budget and make it work. I mean, I don't have a crystal ball, and I can't tell you how many transfers I'm going to do. I don't know if I'm going to do any calls in the town of Hudson. I don't know if our call volume is going to go higher than 1,100.
Sure.
I mean, that's stuff that we have to wait and see how 2019 plays out and see what happens. I mean, if 2019 was done a couple months ago, well, then 2020 would be a pretty easy budget to do because we can pretty much gauge what we're going to do off of that.
So if we're at 3 paramedics full-time, any part-time? We just, if we lose another paramed and go down to 2 with the 1.5 model, we'd be leaning more on our part-time paramedics, I take it, until we get staff
Until we get staff back up, yes.
All right.
Can I clarify? On that side? So Josh, you're currently at 3 in January and February.
Correct.
And how has that worked out with I think you've done what, 8 or 9 interfacility transfers?
Yeah.
And how many mutual aids? Have you done mutual aids for town of Hudson?
Haven't done any. We have not done any in the town of Hudson. We've done a bunch of mutual aid for River Falls, though.
Okay. With the 3 paramedics?
Correct.
Jim?
I think one of the, we talk about you were asking about permanent EMTs, part-time EMTs, and I think one of the things we learned is that did not work. Limiting them to people to 24 hours at that salary level was insufficient for anybody to want to do the job.
Well, with the new definition, it seemed to be sufficient.
No, we're not going back to, am I hearing 6/10 EMTs?
What's that? We're staying with the stipend model for 2019 and
Yeah.
forward.
For
I don't
2019.
see 6/10 EMTs, I think we learned didn't work.
For 2019 going forward, this is staying at the stipend model. We're not going back to hourly.
But it's the model is based upon the staffing level from last year, last year. Inclusive of that first part of the year that they were hourly.
Yeah, which Brandon was filling the gaps.
Well,
And
only if you buy into the notion that we weren't fully staffed based upon last year's model. We're changing the whole definition based upon last year's staffing.
What do you mean by buy into the not fully staffed?
Well, our budget was based upon so many people in an ambulance or available on call throughout the year. We know that we didn't pay all that because we weren't fully staffed.
Correct.
So when I say buy into the notion that we're changing based upon not being fully staffed, that's what I mean. We heard from Brandon until he left last year that there were months that we were actually down in the 50 percentile but on average, we were in the 60-some percentile, and he was making up for the difference with all the hours he was putting in. That's what I'm talking about.
But now you're suggesting with continuous improvement that we change the definition of fully staffed way more often than once a year, right?
Exactly.
I mean,
Way
so
more often
I
than
think
once
we
a
need
year.
to maybe
We should
move
go down
away
the
from
court.
that term fully staffed.
Well, that's, I.
Well,
It's really deceptive.
Except for what we're talking about is what was fully staffed, what was supposed to be fully staffed last year, and the numbers are based upon the fact that we weren't fully staffed last year. So we can't move away from that yet. It's still out there. We weren't fully staffed last year, and when you look at the savings that we had in that department last year, it was based upon the fact that we weren't fully staffed. So in order to make the comparison, we're still going to use that definition for last year. Parameters are changing for the proposal, saying we're going to use last year's model as not fully staffed as next year's model or this year's model for the remainder of the year as fully staffed.
Except there-
60% last year is going to be 100% this year.
Correct.
But if we
Thank you.
change our language, which I don't think is it's against any rules.
Well, here, let me
They're internal
let me
definitions,
interject
right?
for just one moment, because there is something that everybody is missing here that has not come up, and I don't want to go too far down this road before we bring it up. And that is the fact that our RFP called for what? When the RFP went out, we said we want proposals based upon
2 ambulances.
2 ambulances, 24/7. So now the rules are changing. And I think that we need to address that. Are we going to allow the rules to change, and then can they change for everybody? And what does that mean? I mean, this whole RFP process is not your standard RFP process. Anybody who has been down this road, and I'm sure you have, Sarah, I know you have, Bill, Paul, I'm not so sure about you, I presume, Jim, maybe you have, I don't know. But this is not a standard RFP process by any means. We have allowed, and we have the authority to do that, don't get me wrong. Well, we have allowed this process to go in a lot of different directions that otherwise would not happen. And that goes for a whole lot of different things, all right? Allowing multiple proposals to come in the first place. We start out with A, B, and C, and now we're down to F, and that's fine. This is our service. We definitely want to give them the latitude to do that. We've got people that are making requests for information and copying the competitor, if you will, on that information that's being requested. This is not a normal process. So it's a question of exactly, I mean, how do you want to handle this? Because we started out by making everybody, people that are no longer in the discussion, saying that your proposal is going to be based upon 2 paramedics 24/7. The rules are changing.
Our needs have changed.
Yeah, transfers and
I don't know
town
that.
of Hudson.
So, but what about those people that were at the table that spent their money, time, and energy responding to the RFP that we put out?
Well, let me just read what the RFP says.
Thank you.
It says paramedic advanced life support service will be available to the service area 24 hours per day, 7 days per week, 365 days per year. The proposal must describe how many ambulances will be dedicated to serving the city and the surrounding municipalities. So what it says is 24/7 ALS service. You tell us how many
Oh, well, I apologize. I thought it was
ambulances
2.
are necessary
I think we're thinking
to.
2.
Pardon
We
me?
probably are thinking 2 because
Thinking 2 because they all
that's-
came in except for, North Memorial's was actually, I think, 1.5, 2.
Well, I apologize for
One
that. I
and
thought it was
2/3.
2. I thought-
So, I would have.
Mr. Mayor, what I'm wondering is, we have a lot of guests tonight. Could we possibly hear some of the?
Well, as long as it has to do with the discussion that's going on. As I said, when I laid out the parameters, we're not here to talk about anything that is not specific to our proposal.
But I'm just thinking people have taken time.
Sure,
I'm
absolutely.
curious to hear what they have to say.
Is there anybody that would like to comment on things that you've heard so far? Yes, sir. Step up. Please, microphone, identify yourself with your address.
I'm Paul Malika, 207 South 17th Street. I have been watching the ad hoc committee since it started. I'm going to try to contain myself, and my question is this. Never have we ever addressed the issue about the cost to the city. In my opinion, the city council's responsibility is for the city, our fiscal city, money we have here. How can you allow us to lose money every year for something we have no control over? January's invoicing by EMS that I got from the city was $163,000. When you factor in bill patient, Medicare, and Medicaid, those three numbers accounted for $134,000. You tell me how you're going to make money at this. I own a business. I'm successful at a business. This is not a successful business, and the city should not be saddled with this expense. If you cannot get it to a zero cost to the city, it is not a benefit of the city, and you need to understand that. This is not a social media dig. This is strictly numbers, and it's what's good for the city and the health of this city. That should be number one. I haven't, the profession for the EMTs, that's their choice. And if they end up having to go look for a job, that's life. And you all need to understand that. This city should not be put out for 22 or 25 or 30 people. This city needs to be standing on its own 2 feet and not doling out $200,000 and $300,000 a year to help an entity that we don't know what the cost is. Not when we have somebody willing to give us a superior performance. 2 paramedics versus a paramedic and an EMT. You tell me how is that not a better deal for the city? I would like to know that. This is really simple, and everybody puts so much time and effort into your own personal needs. There is no personal need here. The city is the personal need, and you need to understand that. There is a lot of money at stake, and it goes down the road for years. Am I at 3 minutes yet?
You know what, I was going to have go ahead and just wrap it up in 30 seconds.
And the other thing you need to understand is, you want to support the EMS, that's fine. But what's going to happen when the fire hall wants to build? We have to house the EMS somehow. Who's going to pay for that? That's another money pit that we're not going to get anything out of. And nobody thinks about this. You got to look at the big picture down the road.
All right. Thank you, Paul. Appreciate that. Anybody else? All right. Where were we?
So we wrapped up, I think, the St. Croix proposal.
Are you done, Jerry?
I do have some questions.
Okay.
This contains in this proposal the renovation of the Ward Avenue building?
$57,000 approximately debt service per year. Yes.
Where is that? I know I saw it earlier. Was that in the
Okay,
cover letter?
in the cover sheet, but also
Yeah, I saw that. I don't know if it was in there.
It's in capital outlay.
where is it?
Yeah, capital outlay, is that it? Line 27?
No, no, line 29, Ward Avenue.
Oh, yeah, 2 down.
Big
Two
letters.
down.
Yeah.
Big
Bold.
letters, that's why I couldn't see it.
And the numbers based on that was the 500,000?
530,000. It's the number I received from Brenda, what the debt service would be over 10 years.
And just a question, I mean, we lost 2 directors from, recently. Is there any plan to hire another director? I mean, for the ambulance service?
If the vote goes to keep St. Croix EMS, absolutely, we're going to have to hire a new director.
And that's not included in any of these costs?
Yes, it is.
What's that?
Yes, it is. That's what we budgeted for.
Devin?
We originally budgeted to have a director. Obviously, we paid Brandon, right?
Right.
So that's built into the budget.
Right.
That's already budgeted for
Yes.
2019.
For 2019, there was an EMS director built into the budget.
Okay. and these
Based on our
numbers
salary
reflect that.
schedule.
Okay, thank you.
May I ask what salary that is at, though?
What?
May I ask what salary that would be budgeted
I
at?
would have to, I mean, I can be back in a minute and let you know that I don't have that right in
That
front
would
of
be
me. I think it's in this 60 to 70 range, maybe 65 to 75. I don't have that in front of me, so I'd have to look that up.
Gotcha.
You know, and that's something that, in theory, you know, depending on what you wanted to do, if you needed to adjust that, you can adjust that salary schedule at any time you want for, you know, for a new position or any position.
So I want to, same question, Jerry, that Stan asked. Did you, is that, as in Devin, we're going to need you here still. Did you include as full-time staff? I mean, obviously, we're reducing what we're considering full-time or fully staffed, but are you considering in that equation the salary for a new director? Jerry?
Yes, because that was one of the adjustments we made on that line where I talked about going down 25%.
Yep.
It includes a director, an operations supervisor, and an administrative assistant. The same we have now, same staffing we have now, at full-time with benefits. So that's included in the bottom line here.
All right.
Can I
So, go ahead.
Sorry.
Go
I'm
ahead.
just wondering, Devin, so what would be the end cost if that position was more $85,000, $90,000?
At another $15,000.
It would be 15, or would it be, okay.
So use 90?
Yeah.
Putting pressure on me here.
Oh, I'm sorry.
No, that's okay.
Not going to question too when you're done.
So why don't you ask another question?
Yeah.
So I can get this.
I think it'll be for Devin. What is the EMT stipend now?
It ranges from 12 to 14? 12 to 13, depending on the.
Per hour.
For every 12 hour, it works out to be $12 to $13 per hour. They get paid that over a 12-hour stipend.
Okay,
So it's 12 for basic, 13 for intermediate.
okay.
Suzanne?
Yeah, I got a couple questions. First of all, I noticed that the town of Troy and the other partners, the other North Hudson, it's a static amount right across. We gain in population, so you could see that from 2018 to 2019, ours went up a little bit because we have additional population, and that hasn't been considered in these figures, so.
I meant it to be conservative, so rather than
Right.
guess what it would be, because I don't know what the population growth is, I didn't know if it was 1% or 5%. So I assumed it was flat and hoped it wasn't going down.
But that's okay. I'm
That'd
just
be
pointing that out. You
conservative,
might
yeah.
have more income.
Yes.
The other thing is this going to be a rolling, well, okay, we're just looking at the next 4 years, and possibly the next 5. So the 4 years, would we be signing a new contract that would be non-rolling, or would we be just finishing out
With the
5
municipal
years?
people, my recommendation is stick with the current contract between now and 2022. Give SCMS a big opportunity through continuous improvement and all the other programs that we've discussed to actually get to this point through the whole RFP process, and see if we can actually convince the other municipalities to stick with us. But the financial shows they've made a decision not to in 2023. So there's no partners subsidy in 2023.
And no partners.
No partners.
Period.
That's the worst case. With the worst case,
Just be the city.
just be the city. And with the worst case, we do not have any continuous improvement efficiencies. Worst case, we have no interfacilities. In worst case, we have no additional population. We still end up with about $250,000 in reserve. Our goal, though, is not to end up with $250,000 in reserve, is to keep it at the current 600,000, approximately 600,000 to 700,000 through continuous improvement and opportunities, not wishful thinking. We think, from the whole RFP process and a lot of the questions that we have today, frankly, we think one of the big advantages, which we're seeing in real life here today, is that this is a very open and transparent process between SCMS and the city of Hudson. And I think if you made a decision to go with SCMS, then that's the opportunity you get to have discussions about what is full staffing. is full staffing really a baseline of 2018, the staffing that we've succeeded? Do you want to increase it? Do you want to decrease it? That is something I would suggest you look at on a quarterly basis. Do we have the right staffing or not? Do we have some issues? Do we have some response times shrinking? So in other words, as the performance changes, we can actually have that transparency. Once we outsource, once the city outsources, that transparency goes away. So I think this discussion is really pretty amazing. I really welcome it myself, and I hope you enjoyed it too.
Sure.
Did you ever?
Go ahead.
Did you get an answer yet, Devin?
Yes.
Sorry.
So at 70,000, I just picked that number without knowing what it is now. The total package would be about 102. If you went to 90, it would be about 130. So you're talking $25,000 to $30,000 increase by raising the salary from 70 to 90. Because you have the salary and then you have Social Security and you have retirement. Health insurance would be static. You'll pay the same. Again, I figured that at a family rate, you'd pay the same whether they're paying them 70 or.
With a competitor, the transparency goes away? Really, how do you explain that?
You wouldn't know the head count. That's what I was talking about. The staffing levels, you would not know what the staffing levels would be.
Why wouldn't we?
Would they tell you?
Well, that's a good question, because nobody told us that until we had to ask the question. And in fact, the only way that we found out that we went a period of time without an ambulance on one occasion was it came up in an ad hoc committee meeting. Nobody bothered to tell us that. And you would have thought that the moment that happened, we would have received a phone call.
From SEMS, you mean?
That's right. Yeah. And we didn't. And so, which leads one to wonder how often that happened. And I mean, it happened, I think it had been weeks after it happened before we even were aware of it. And it came from, not from our service, but from just a member of the ad hoc committee that threw it out one day at the ad hoc committee. So, I don't know. But I would think, I just think that that's kind of an odd statement to make, because I don't know that that's correct.
When I talked about the transparency, you're correct. I don't know what would happen in a specific patient event. However, where the transparency that SCMS has always had and continues is in the monthly reports that shows the median time from the time it was called to the time that they were on site. That's readily available through our call center. That's not really, the other systems use a different call center, not the same one that SCMS uses. So that's what I meant by transparency, Mary. I don't know what the behavior or what the policies or processes are currently in any individual case. But for sure, if SCMS's 90 percentile went from the 10.38 minutes today to 38 minutes, you would know that.
I don't think that's true.
Oh, you don't get those reports?
No.
Would you like them?
Yeah.
I think you should have them.
I think you ought to ask the town of Hudson how they feel about the reports that they've been getting that they never saw before.
So the ones that the city of Hudson's given me is that considered confidential, or is that's not distributed?
I don't know. I
don't think so. It hasn't.
Would you like them?
I've been on the committee for almost 6 years now, and we don't get reports like that at our meetings.
Well, who does get those reports?
Nobody's asked for any reports.
Oh, well, back to our continuous improvement. I think we should definitely distribute those. There's two parts of transparency. That's the one, and the second one is what is the staffing level and the cost. But if you're not getting those reports, either one of them, I think you should. But
I would agree.
I'm not stepping on anybody's toes, but I think that's reasonable.
That's right. So, and that's my question about the transparency, because I know, as I said, I have talked to board members out at the town of Hudson, and they say that they're getting reports coming out of Lakeview that the likes of which they've never seen before. So again, just to your point about transparency, I thought that was a little outrageous and probably not accurate.
Jerry, can I talk some numbers again?
Sure.
So you've got it somewhat kind of going out till 2023. Couple questions. Is 15%, would that be enough? Is it feasible for us and our partners? Hudson, St. Croix County is growing, and it's growing fast. 2.5 ambulance, and I have contention with it, or 1.5. I want 2 ambulances. I don't see Lakeview proposing that. Correct me if I'm wrong.
I don't either.
I don't recall.
I didn't see any of the other RFPs proposing that. but-
Lakeview, I don't see 2 ambulances static. That's my concern for safety, number one. We're growing too fast.
2 ambulances, what?
Static.
Static. No,
in
that's
Hudson.
part of the,
The contract. Let me finish. So what are we going to do to plan for the future? Is the per capita going to go up? Is the percentage that you're saying 15%, is that enough? Is it feasible? We know where Stan is, pretty clear.
That where Stan's board is.
Board, sorry,
Hey,
Stan.
I'm only one vote on that board.
Sorry, Stan. You're not projecting out to the future far enough to make a sound decision, I don't think.
The 15% is not something you decide today, that we're going to increase it by 15% or 8%. Somewhere in between 8 and 15% is what I think is the decision you would make every year, based on exactly what you said, the city growing. If the city grew by 8,000 people, that's the same as what we have lost from town of Hudson. We do not need a 15% increase if we add those additional revenue calls. If I'm wrong and we don't even get 3 or 4 interfacility transfers, which is not included in this particular budget, that also, if we actually rephrase that, if we do get more than 3 or 4 interfacility transfers a month, which is it's approximately 10% of the total, then there's no need to have a 15%. We actually could have an 8% increase. So the idea is at the end of the year, which is what Joshua Shake said, we've had a big sea change here, so we did a conservative number that said if you stay the course with an 8% increase, you're good for 2019, and you could decide, do you want to stick with an 8% in 2020, which is what we're thinking very early, 10 months before the end of the year, or do you want to do something closer to 15%? We believe, if the population doesn't change, doesn't increase, and certainly doesn't decrease, that's what this financial thing is really about. The idea is,
It will change, and we have a aging population.
and if it changes, the runs go up, revenue goes up, staffing goes up. So I see the 990,601 less the 68,000 salary savings, so that 920,000, that is a budget based on your current workload. If it goes up by 10% because of population, I think that should go up also, without increasing the per capita, without increasing the actual.
Randy pointed out, though, we have an aging population that's more and more reliant on, at that point, on Medicare and Medicaid. So the percentage of Medicare and Medicaid runs is also going to go up, which is going to increase our costs.
Well, Medicare and Medicaid revenue is still Medicare and Medicaid revenue.
Yeah, but it's a
right?
lot.
50 cents on the dollar.
Right.
I mean, and you increase that, you're going to lose money.
Oh, we cannot increase Medicare and Medicaid.
No,
I know that.
the
That's
number
what I'm
of runs,
Right,
Medicare
the
and
Number of
Medicaid runs.
You can watch that now if you look at the run sheet.
From a plan commission standpoint, I mean, how do you feel about that growth rate? I mean, it's more dense growth for the city than the town.
We have 2 undeveloped housing annexations right now, and 1 coming on, and I don't know if that's accounted for. I don't think it is. It doesn't seem like it would be accounted for.
No.
So we're
You're
short
correct.
ambulance. Huh?
You're correct. This only accounts for where we're at as of today.
See, and I have a problem with that because we're not planning out towards the future. We're trying to do a very quick fix on something for 4 or 5 years?
No, I think
Well,
that that's that continuous improvement. We look at the actual when we get down the road, and then we change what we think 2020 is going to be. The 2020 through 2023 has to always be updated based on what is really happening in our population and run levels and transfer levels, and so.
I agree with you. I'm just, the reason I brought it up is I'm just looking for sustainability, because yes, obviously we'll move towards what's being built, but,
I think we're all in agreement. I want to be careful. Just because I have 5 years for now, next year you'll have another 5 years, but it'll be to 2024. The next year you made another 5 years. That's the only way the continuous improvement. Continuous improvement is a very big deal. It's not something simple. Let me explain what I mean on a very short summary of it. And, and I've been certified for, ISO 9000 and Kaizen and some of these things. But basically, those are big words. All it really means is we take Josh and the SEMS's current workflow processes by several hundred red pens, give them to the team, and start marking up those processes when it doesn't make sense. That's what continuous improvement really is. It gives us an opportunity then to review the entire population of the SEMS operation, not just Josh, not just the director, and say, our staffing levels are wrong. Here's what happened. Here's, change that process to actually become more efficient. As you said, now all of a sudden it's more Medicare and Medicaid. What are we going to do about that? I really believe, and I really mean strongly about it, feel strongly about this, I really believe that this is evidence by going through this RFP process, how far we've come from where we were just since last October, how much you know about the operation, how much we know about what you want that we didn't really have through this RFP process. Imagine doing that in SCMS's operation itself, not necessarily a city council. Imagine doing the same process continuously, not just when we have an RFP.
Suzanne?
I just wanted to follow through on something that Randy said. We would have 1.5 ambulances instead of 2. Well, actually, you got to consider the whole area. The number of ambulances would be 2.5 with the town of Hudson, and 1.5 for the 3 that are, the 3 entities that are left. 1 for the town of Hudson. So actually, you're gaining a little bit in the number of ambulances.
I don't think so. Is that, well, that's not.
2.5, where's the other ambulance coming from?
You have one right now for the town of Hudson.
The Lakeview one she's talking about.
Lakeview.
That only, that's not right.
So are you contracted with Lakeview or contracting with, you don't have a contract, correct?
Oh.
Currently,
What
correct?
she's saying is that
Has
there
one.
would be, in this area, okay, the area, the service area, the former service area that we covered, would have 2.5 ambulances if you include the one from Lakeview, because that one's going to be in this area permanently now.
Well, they have one that is dynamically deployed. Is that correct? Correct me if I'm wrong, John.
No, we have one that's here 24/7.
Right now dedicated for the township.
Yeah, well, it is, correct. Do we use dynamic deployment? Yes, we do. But it is here, its staff's here 24/7, 365.
Yeah. So we go with you guys, we get another ambulance,
24/7, 365.
but it's still only 1.5 because one is for the township.
It's,
I'm not trying to make semantics of it, but I would want to see 2 static ambulances. But you're not going to do that because you're dynamic deployment.
and they can get into that when they have an opportunity to speak, but
But I want.
it's the same as mutual aid.
Yeah, but I just want to
It's
make
the same
sure
as going to mutual
it's
aid.
It's part of my process of trying to figure out if we are keeping our general public safe. Now, I'm not saying we're not, but keeping it plush, I guess, if you will, for lack of a better term.
Yeah, I look at mutual aid as a backup to when things really go to hell. And I don't see that.
Not when they go to hell,
Not
it's when
the
you
same
have,
thing.
and we can get into that a little later too if you want, but it's not when things go to hell, it's when you have one ambulance out on transfer, another ambulance gets a call. Pretty simple, that happened a lot here, I would imagine. Nothing out of the ordinary. It's pretty ordinary.
Right. But we add when you now bring dynamic deployment into that, and you add a whole nother facet to where those ambulances are. So it's,
Potentially, that might be called away. Think of it as our contract for mutual aid, and they got called away. Same as we would be calling away somebody else's ambulance from River Falls or Baldwin or New Richmond.
I don't think you can equate that to having
You know
two
what, and I
static
think,
ambulances.
and I agree, I don't think you can, because in fact, in my perception, from my perspective, the dynamic deployment, as I saw it, works much better, because if we go to mutual aid, if we have to go to a mutual aid call here and call River Falls, we don't know where their ambulances are at. We have no idea. The call goes there, and no, they don't have an ambulance nearby, or maybe they do, but maybe it's quite a ways away.
Yeah, I actually
Same
think we
thing
do
with
have.
Richmond, same thing with Baldwin. With what you see with the CAD system, they know the moment an ambulance gets pulled away, another one is going to come in somewhere between, in the service area, but somewhere between us and where that ambulance was in the first place, to get here quicker in the event that they need it. So from what I saw out there with the CAD system, I think it works very well. And of course, the CAD system, something that our St. Croix County Communications Department is thinking about doing here, planning on doing in the next 2 to 3 years. That's down the road for them. We've already got it over there at Lakeview.
But they do monitor that, and they do basically know who has ambulances available in St. Croix County.
They don't know where they're at.
Yeah, they have a pretty
They
decent
don't
idea.
know where they're at.
They do not have a computer that says they're here and here and here, but the individual operators have a pretty good idea where the ambulances are and who has ambulances available.
Well, we'll let them talk about that if they want to. I think obviously they need to have a discussion about dynamic deployment when they get an opportunity to speak.
Randy, did we address your question? We don't want to be dancing around this.
Yeah, no, I'm fine right now.
Okay.
I have a question. Josh, I know that I asked you this question a little bit earlier today. I want to talk a little bit about wages. The current wages that we have right now for our EMTs. What is our base rate starting and what does it go up to on EMTs?
EMT basic is.
Josh, can you get it in the mic, please?
For EMT basic, it's $12.50 an hour.
Okay.
EMT advanced, EMT intermediate is $13 an hour.
13?
Yep.
If I've been here as an EMT, I'm not an EMT, but if I've been here for 5 years, what is my base rate?
For an EMT?
Yeah.
Still the same.
Still the same?
Yep.
Okay. Looking at paramedics, what do you start at paramedics at?
19 something an hour.
Okay, 19 and change?
Yeah.
And what does that go up to?
We just got the new step scale. I don't know if Devin.
Okay, call it 22. Okay.
22.
Again, I'm a paramed. I've been here for 5 years. What am I making ceiling? Is that 22 or is that dependent on training?
Depends on training. If you get upgraded to critical care, you get paid a little bit more.
Gotcha.
So.
In your opinion, and how it shakes out with services in Wisconsin, St. Croix County, how does that compare? Is it enough for us to maintain our employment?
I think it's enough, but there's too many other factors that play into it. You know, jobs, sustainability. You know, are we gonna be here in a week or a month, or just more or less job security. If they feel safe here. But St. Croix EMS and other services in Wisconsin have always been a stepping stone. I mean, Matt Milder, he started here. Lakeview's operations guy, he started here and got the experience he needed and jumped. Went to the other side of the river to work. I mean, that's what 95% of our people do. We're just a stepping stone.
Right.
So,
do you feel we're competitive enough to the rest in St. Croix County, New Richmond, Baldwin?
I think we could do a little bit better, but can't really do too much better with with uncertainty of call volume and stuff. Do I think we could pay better? I think so, yes. Can we afford to right now? I don't know.
Affording aside, what does New Richmond pay?
Richmond starts at right around 20, 21 an hour, depending on level of service.
For paramed?
Correct.
And EMTs?
I think he starts right around 10 or 11 an hour.
That they start at?
Correct.
Oh, okay.
But then they get incentives for every 2,000 hours worked. So they'll get $1 an hour raise every 2,000 hours worked.
Got it. And we do not currently have a program that way.
Correct.
Along those same lines, we just put an ad out for a parking coordinator for the city of Hudson, and the starting pay for that is $19.74 an hour, which is more than our paramedics will start at. We just had an ad, and hopefully we hired a public works employee at $25 an hour. So it just kind of puts things in perspective, and I look at that and I say, I have people, paramedics, who I want to save my life, and I'm paying them less than I'm someone who's coordinating our parking services. What's the balance? The balance is off to me, and that's why I I look at our budget and we're paying EMS is the 6th most expensive operation we have, just barely above, what was, okay, inspections, a couple, $20,000, $30,000 above our inspection services. So I look at that and I say, this doesn't feel right. We have a budget for the police of $3.5 million. We pay $800,000 for a fire service, which doesn't pay anything back. And do we have to have that? Is that, going to Paul's comments about whether that's a service we should be offering? We're missing something here about how important it is for this city to have and offer and support an emergency medical service. And I think that piece of that the heart of that gets lost in this. How important is it for us to do that, and for the entire city to help take care of that? The entire city pays for fire, whether you have a fire or not.
Right.
The entire city pays that burden. So it's put it in perspective as to, is that the kind of service, is that emergency service one of the ones that we want to have? And then we start thinking about what are we paying for it, and what should we be paying for it?
How about for service? I mean, you don't. There's a private service that's offering to do the same job that you're funding through the city. You're not going to find anybody to come in and plow your streets or to have a police force. Those aren't offered by private companies. We're being offered to have the same kind of service that we have now for a lot less money. So that's what I look at. And they're talking about cutting costs for St. Croix EMS. Well, that's the same thing that we're supposed to do as village trustees or city council people. We're supposed to be looking out for the council, the dollars that everyone spends. So that's where, to save the money here, I think Paul did a great job. And it's like, hey, I mean, we're supposed to be looking out for all the citizens, not a small little group.
2,000 people a year.
What's that?
About 2,000 calls a year. That's not a small group of people that are getting serviced by EMS in this area.
Well, that's the whole.
That's 10%.
That's the whole population.
That's 10% in a year, a given year gets serviced by EMS.
Yeah, 3.5% is what we use in the village. That's what the population has been up there.
The 3.5%, you're saying that 3.5% of the citizens use EMS services?
That's the calls to North Hudson. And no, we're not saying that those aren't the same people using the same calls either. We don't have that information.
Right, so it could actually be smaller than that. Okay, and I looked at those numbers because, but I didn't have complete numbers, but yeah, a good estimate would be about 5 to 6% of the overall population is what's using EMS services. So you're saying that the other 95% shouldn't have to pay for any of the services?
Why should they have to pay when it's offered for free? I mean, if you could get your streets plowed for free, you'd do it. I mean, it's. I'm done with this board.
I think there's more to it than, say, the cost. Because response times are, I believe, the most important in patient care. And this is our citizens. This is our residents. It's us. I've had to call ambulance before. So we're talking about us taking care of us. And the way we respond using a static deployment model means that our ambulances, at least one, is always available 24/7 for a response to a 911 call. But more so than that, we use first responders in a second vehicle. So when you look at many times that chase vehicle might arrive first, but our response times that are reported by the county are only when the ambulance comes. So there's an opportunity, maybe 50% of the time, that the chase vehicle actually got there first. So if anything, we are over-reporting our response times. Correct? Does that make sense?
Kind of. We don't know that, though.
Well,
We have
sometimes.
an average, the average response time actually for St. Croix EMS, in my opinion, the word significantly applies. Average response time is significantly greater for St. Croix EMS than it is for Lakeview.
So I don't know where you got your numbers, but we
Excuse
just,
me. All right, so
we just got a report from
we
just got a report from Lakeville saying it was 9 minutes 5 seconds
that was Town of Hudson.
for town of Hudson. Well, we can imagine it would be pretty similar for us. We're not far away from the town of Hudson.
I think the average response time for St. Croix EMS in the Town of Hudson is 11 minutes and 50 seconds.
But
that
That's
is,
a 90 percentile.
here's an issue.
Now, but I wanted to go by not what's happening out there, because they're coming from the hospital, and there's also distance from here to the Town of Hudson, but I'm going by what was in the proposal. The proposal that was submitted by you guys said that your response time was 9 minutes and, what was it, 9?
9 minutes 5 seconds is what they.
No, not Lakeview. I'm talking about St. Croix EMS. In the proposal, average response time is 9.9 minutes.
So, but in current reports,
You're looking at just the Town of Hudson. I'm looking at what was presented in the proposal. For the service area, it was 9.9
I
minutes.
think it's fair to look at both sets of numbers. So Joanne ran numbers for me because Josh had provided response times reports yesterday or Friday or whenever it was, but it was really hard to read and I couldn't get any averages, so I asked Devin to secure a report that said what were St. Croix EMS's response time in January and February. And that was sitting at my desk when I got here today and doing the math. It looks like they've calculated 6 minutes 20 seconds was the average response time for St. Croix EMS in January, and 7.2 minutes in February. So those numbers.
Where is that? That's taking the Town of Hudson out of the equation.
But that is showing that a static deployment model has an opportunity for greatly reduced response times. And if we're talking about public safety and the safety of our residents, response time is the biggest factor that we have to offer.
I would agree with you 100%. Response time is probably the most important thing that we're going to talk about, but you just pulled the Town of Hudson out of the equation. And so your static model that you're talking about is with a reduced service area. You know, if you want to put them back in the equation, let's look at the response time that was submitted with the proposal, and that's 9.9 minutes.
I think we need to look at how these response times are calculated. One of the issues that I have is that response times are calculated from when the ambulance is en route to the time that it arrives.
For who? For who?
For the, I think for all of them. I'm not sure. That's what I'm trying to
Well, it was presented here with the presentation that the Lakeview showed with their dynamic deployment model, that their response time is from the time the call comes to them.
Call comes to them, okay.
From Alina.
So it's the
Now,
time that
there was also a response time that showed an en route time. But their response time that they reported to us was from the time the call came to them from Alina. Did I get that wrong or right? Or it's right?
Okay.
But you're right, because it is different with St. Croix EMS, and I think that's a good point. I think that you continue with what you're saying.
Well, one of the things that we need is really times from when St. Croix County Dispatch receives the 911 call. We need an analysis of all of this.
We have it.
Okay.
And so that we know, because,
Should be in your possession.
well, all right, I've got these, which tells us, but this hasn't been, I don't have all of the numbers calculated. I'm seeing that, all right, so from the time that St. Croix County, and I mean, this is the Town of Hudson January EMS report. Yes, I've got the St. Croix EMS numbers as well. And I don't have all of those numbers there. But there's, between the time that the 911 call comes into the St. Croix County Dispatch Center to the time that the unit is notified. So is it the time that the unit is notified or the time that Lakeview Dispatch is notified?
Our response time is based on the time that we receive the call. So the minute that we're paged out, the clock starts ticking.
So wait a
For
minute, who's paged out? Do you mean that the unit is paged?
Yes.
So then the
So that
unit
would be-
notified time?
That
on
would be,
this
yep.
report. So
That
you're
would be
talking,
from our dispatch.
so you're talking this time?
Yep.
And then to which time? The
To the
time,
time we arrive on the scene.
arrive on the scene?
Yep.
Okay.
So that's the true measure of response time in any EMS system throughout the United States. You always, you base your response time on the time the unit was notified.
Okay, but there is a delay with the extra
Yeah, so,
step of having to go through a lineup.
no.
Well, that's what Steve Takash says.
That's what that report says.
That's, yeah, it's on the report. It's the first
Well, but
set of
that
green.
has nothing to do with, that delay has nothing to do with Alina. I mean, we can't say that that's because they have to do that step to call Alina to do that. So in the dispatch center, and I don't want to talk about their business, but they have a number of steps that they have to do when they receive a 911 call before they can put the call out. So no EMS system is going to base their response times on how long the 911 center holds the call to get their information. A lot of the things that we don't know is that that call might not even be a medical situation. It might start out as a welfare check. So you're going to have a 911 receive time at X minutes, and they're sending a law enforcement officer out there to maybe see what's going on. The officer may get on scene and say, this is a medical, will you start the ambulance? So now you're going to see that could be a 10-minute delay, that could be a half-hour delay. I don't care what system you work in throughout the United States, you're going to have those types of things that happen. So the step, what you will notice on that report is the time that our dispatch held the call before it was paged out. And they average about 30 seconds. So meaning from the time they get the call from St. Croix County, the phone call, to the time our unit is notified, and that's when our clock starts ticking, that's the time. So I think there's one time on there that they had it for a minute. But they actually average 15 seconds is the time that they have the call before we're given the call. So if you pull any data from St. Croix County and look at the data from St. Croix County, you're going to see they are averaging somewhere between 2 and, I'll say 2 minutes that they have the call on average. And I've not done the analysis to see what that is.
And that is for anybody.
Anybody. I don't.
So we've got the numbers here from the town of Hudson that show that the average delay time between the county and St. Croix EMS was over 3 minutes.
So in the town of Hudson, we asked for 3 years of data, response time data to the town of Hudson, because we knew that once we became the provider there, that this question was going to continue to come up. Well, when the previous provider was here, they were way better than you were. I don't have any evidence to prove that they were or weren't. we asked for the data numerous times and we were told we couldn't get it. So we received the data from St. Croix County, put together all the data from the county, included all the data from the county and the spreadsheet, and presented that at the town board meeting last Tuesday. So again, that's the only way we could do it. So we pulled the data from St. Croix County to come up with those numbers.
Those numbers being your response times or St.
No, what Rich is referring to there.
Was that sent out to all
I
of
haven't
us?
seen that, I don't believe.
Pardon me?
Was that sent out to all of us?
I have no idea. It came to me from the town.
Okay, I haven't seen that.
I haven't either.
That I know
Okay.
of. Was that something
I
that
just
can be
presumed-
shared with the rest of us?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, I presumed it had been shared, so.
No, it has not.
One other thing, John, if you would. Average response time?
Our overall average response time for 2018, I think, was 6 minutes and 44 seconds. And you guys have that data. I think I gave you that data in January. So don't fault me if I got the number off a little bit, but it's 6 minutes and something seconds. And I do want to elaborate a little bit on that because Randy had made a comment. We gave you the response times for each city we're responsible to cover. And obviously, I didn't want to do that because some of them have long response times. But again, they're, 12 and 15, 20 miles away.
Is that in here? In the proposal?
It was in the for the January meeting, it was data that you guys requested for the January meeting.
I'll have to find that.
On that sheet, it has each one of our cities. So there you go. So the reference I want to make to that is, if you want to compare apples to apples, look at Stillwater, City of Stillwater, our response times for the City of Stillwater, Oak Park Heights, Bayport, and North St. Paul. I think those are fair comparisons to what you would see in the City of Hudson. Again, geographically, looking at the City of Hudson, that kind of gives you a good comparison to what you would expect here in your own city.
And obviously you have some longer response times. on
Absolutely,
some
and
of those.
we're not hiding any of that.
Right.
But when you live 20-some miles away, you're going to have a long response time. It happens throughout the country.
John, are you good with, do you feel good about the January and February response times to the town of Hudson?
I do. And the reason I do is we haven't seen a winter like this in how many years. Our roads have been terrible. And I think for us to maintain a 9-minute and 5-second response time in this weather, I think that's really good.
Because when I was looking at the data this weekend, I have, just for the lights and sirens runs that you guys did in January and February, I have 16 runs over 10 minutes out of 35, which means 46% of the time.
Wait, say that again. I'm
So
sorry,
by
Paul.
the data you gave us, if I'm reading this correctly, for the town of Hudson in January and February, there were 16 runs of the 35 runs, just lights and sirens. I'm not counting the non-licensed sirens.
Yeah.
So 16 out of 35, if my math is correct, that's 46% of the time. It's been over 10 minutes. And that's kind of why I'm asking. When I saw that, it makes me a little bit nervous.
I don't think that's.
Is that from the time the 911 call came in? Or is that
That's from the time they're listing here on the right.
Is that the one that shows the delay and the
Well, that's an older one.
So it's from the data we just got Friday. I looked through January and February.
I have that here, Paul.
Yeah. And again, I just want to count lights and sirens. I'm not worried about the other
Right.
ones.
Paul, on the January report, are you looking at the red font on the time difference in the green?
Well, I hate to tell you, I don't have a color printer, so.
He's looking at the top number in the second green
I'll show you what I'm looking at.
column.
So this guy here. So if you go through here, all the yellowed ones here, if I'm reading this correctly, tell me if I'm not. These would be the run times. Sorry.
I can't see what that's on.
And then this is the other one didn't print, so I just did this and I took it off that side.
So this is arrive at patient time. So I mean, that could vary if it, you know, if the patient's out in the field, you're gonna walk out there, so. This is, here's the cutoff.
Right. Right, so I looked at it, what I did is I looked at the cutoff part on my computer, and I added those times there. I don't have a great printer. My question is that true that it's 46% of the time to the
No,
town of
that's not
Hudson, it's
true.
been over 10 minutes?
We had one call, January 6th, January 17th, January 22nd, and the 28th that were longer than 10 minutes.
Yep, that's what I'm showing too.
Okay.
Keep going into February.
February 10th, February 26th, February 26th.
26.
2 on February 26th, right?
Again, take weather into consideration. So the one, if you go back to January, the one on January 6th was a snowstorm.
January 6th.
No, I take that back. I'm sorry. January 17th, I believe, was a snowstorm.
19th was a snowstorm.
John, what about, so correct me if I'm wrong, 213, I got 1256.
213. Say again. No, that's, so Joyce requested our data to show dispatch, time of dispatch to the time the ambulance was on scene. So that's what you're going to see in the red font. So the numbers below that on the bottom in that column, there's two sets of numbers in that column. The bottom number represents the time from the time the 911 center, St. Croix County, received the call to the time we were on scene. Again, that was a request from Joyce. That's why that data's on there. Again, no EMS system in the country measures response time based on the time the 911 center receives the call. Because again, we don't have any control over the time that they page us out.
Right. I get that, and I guess my follow-up question would be then, would Lakeview consider having pagers that could better communicate with St. Croix County Dispatch to save that lag time?
And why do you think the pagers would be a better communication?
Well, my understanding is that's what the other services in St. Croix County would use, and that would save that phone call from St. Croix County Dispatch to Alina and then to you guys. So I'm trying to figure out if there's a way to cut down that lag time.
Well, I don't think there's a lag time. I don't know that there's any lag time. I've not seen it in the, if you look at the 911 data from St. Croix County and compare that to a year ago, the 911 data, I don't see that you're going to see any length time difference from what it was a year ago, now that they're calling us.
But we're
It's
seeing,
it's a phone call.
we're seeing that delay though on that report.
Right.
You're seeing it from St. Croix EMS.
But did you see it from last year, I guess is my point.
I don't know.
So
We don't have numbers. in front of
You
us.
have to look at the data from last year and compare it and see there's no difference.
You know, if I could interject here a second, we had also discussed a couple times here that there is software available that can communicate between Alina and St. Croix County Dispatch. That is going to cost somewhere between $40,000 and $100,000. And let's put it at $100,000. Okay? It means that they can communicate directly. It obviates the need for a telephone. And if we were to decide that we went with Lakeview, I would submit that we'd be more than willing to pay that $100,000 out of the city budget in order to save $400,000 plus per year, a one-time.
Are we moving into the Lakeview piece?
So
Well, I was just answering the question. I think.
You know, I think
it begs that
I think
part
there
of the
needs to
answer.
be improvement in that area, so however that happens.
Paul, have you heard, are there issues at the county with the way it's going right now?
I'm just looking at the data that you guys provided us on Friday. Unless I'm reading it wrong, I'm seeing some delay in that.
But again, every call is going to be different. The county is going to have that call longer on certain situations, and it'll be shorter on certain. These, whatever you think are delays, can't be attributed to them calling our dispatch and giving them the information.
Well, tell me if I'm reading this wrong. St. Croix County Dispatch receives a call is the one column. The next column is St. Croix County Dispatch First Responders. The next column is Lakeview Dispatch Notification Time. That's what I'm talking about is if you go down that, if I'm reading this correctly, that's a couple minutes on each, the difference.
Right. And I guess what I'm saying is, look at 2018 data where we're not even involved, and look at the time difference from the time St. Croix County received the call to the time that the first responders in St. Croix EMS were paged out. You're going to see that same delay in there. I've seen it. I've seen the numbers. The numbers are there. That's not a delay in them because of the process. The delay is because of the work that they need to do to gather the information to put the 911 call, or to put the information out to the providers.
Okay.
And we do have that data from 2018 in the St. Croix EMS RFP.
What page?
It's a tab. I mean, it's quite extensive, so you don't have a...
Is that one of the addendums?
Mhm.
What page are you on?
Addendum D, looks like, is the start of it? No.
No, it looks like addendum F.
Yeah, it's still...
Yeah,
Attached
you're
are
right.
sample copies of our monthly detailed incident response times reports. Okay. John, I still have a question. All right, you described the number in red.
Yeah.
The lower number. What's the upper number?
That is our true response time.
That's the one that you use for your averages.
Yep. So when I tell you an average, that's the number I'm going by. So again, that's from the time that our dispatch pages the ambulance out to the time we arrive on scene. That is your true response time.
So that's unit notified time
Yep.
to
On
arrived
scene.
on scene
Yep.
time.
Again, that is an industry standard. That's not a Lakeview. That's not our policy, the way we do it.
No.
That's
I-
an industry standard.
I studied this really hard. I think that red number, I'm sorry, the black number in the second green column
Yep.
is the time that you went en route to the
No.
time on the scene.
That's the
Well, look at the-
total time it took
But
us.
if you do the math, and I checked every one of these, and it was not, clock math is not fun.
It's not, no. But
But it's,
She's right.
if you do the math,
Yeah, she's right.
this is time en route to time on scene. Just look at the first one. You can even just do it, well, let's look at one that's really easy.
Yeah,
the-
1751 and 17,
The 1-5
22,
town
52.
of Hudson Kinney Road one. So you got 5:39:57. You got 3 minutes till it's 5:40.
No.
3
okay.
seconds till it's 5:40, and then to the 5:47:04, you got another 4 seconds. So 3 plus 4 is 7, and then 47 minus the 40 I just talked about was 7:07, and that's what the number is in the second green column, 7.07. Did you follow that?
Yep.
Okay, so that's your time en route to your time in your scene. So this second green number is drive time. That is not time notified to time en route.
The heading says that too.
Yeah.
So that, I think what you're getting confused on is that Lakeview dispatch notified time. So that time is the time that St. Croix County made the phone call to our dispatch. I don't count that time.
Yep, I got
Again-
that.
Okay, no, okay,
So-
the upper number, if you look at the upper number, it's consistent for the time en route to the time arrived on scene.
So just answer this question
Yeah.
without looking at the chart. When you say it's 9 minutes, 5 seconds, did you add up the 23 and the 9:17 and the 27 and the 8:44 and the 24 and the 7:07?
Our response times are based on the time our unit is notified to the time
Yeah,
we're on
and-
scene.
And your first green column is the time you're notified till the time you notify your unit. That's the first green column.
No. So the first green column is showing you the time that Alina dispatch had the call
Oh, I'm
before
sorry,
they.
I'm not talking light green, I'm talking dark green.
Yeah, I am too.
Okay.
So let's just keep on Kinney Road. It says 24 seconds there.
Mm-hmm.
That's how long Alina had the call before they paged Lakeview Ambulance.
Wait a minute, is this
They
February
received the
16th,
call.
or is this different?
They received the call at 05:37:48 from St. Croix County.
Okay, I'm on the
So-
wrong date.
Lakeview dispatch was notified at 5:37:48.
Yes, from St. Croix County. Alina toned out our ambulance at 05:38:12, 24 seconds later. That's the green
toned
column
out.
just shows you.
Toned out.
Hey, notified them.
Okay, so the first dark green column is the difference between the two previous columns.
Yeah, that tells you how long our dispatch held the call before we had it. The same thing holds true with the sage-colored columns for St. Croix County. It shows when they received the call, when they paged out the first responders. And that's my point, to show there's not, if you look at the times that St. Croix County has the call and when they page out the first responders, and now compare that to them paging out or calling our dispatch, you're not going to see that there's a delay there.
I think the numbers disagree with that.
Yeah.
If you look at St. Croix County dispatch and Lakeview dispatch notified time, that's the gap. But the St. Croix dispatch is when they started the call. In other words, if they got on the radios here, or the pagers, that's when they would start the call to anybody in St. Croix County. But there's a minute and a half to 3 minutes on those two columns between the time they initiated the call and the time you received the call.
So the second sage,
So we're losing a minute and a half to 3 minutes there, and that's what I've been harping on for 2 years. That's not an acceptable process. We can't lose that much time.
Jim, you're saying the second sage column with the first, with the white column next to it?
I'm using a different sheet,
Oh, okay.
but it's the St. Croix County dispatch.
Yep, first responders?
I don't know what you're talking about. I don't have first responders. St. Croix County dispatch is the time that they initiate the call.
Okay.
And then the Lakeview dispatch notified time is the time Lakeview receives the call. And if you go through, and these are just, this is the town of Hudson data for January. And there's a minute and a half, there's one that's only 11 seconds, which is kind of a miracle, but the rest of them are 1.5 to 3 minutes.
Yeah.
So that's what we're losing in that process and it's because we're not in direct communication from St. Croix County to Alina. And then they in turn have to get in, and I don't know what their lag time is from them to you. I would assume it's much less because you're connected to them.
And that's
an issue that's quite concerning to me when they talk about the first 4 minutes being critical and we lose 3 minutes in the communication process. This doesn't include whatever the dispatcher has to figure out. He's made the decision, we need to send an ambulance.
Yeah.
And he's got that data and he knows exactly what he wants to go there. So that's a piece that's And I know there have been efforts to address that. And Mayor, you're saying that for $100,000 that we could fix that.
Yes.
Well, and that,
That's if we go with Lakeview, and we'd be saving, $400,000. Well, the first year we did it, we'd save $300,000 and $400,000 whatever per year after that. I think it's money that would be wisely spent, and I agree. I mean, to get it up to state of the art, from everything I saw out there, Alina is state of the art the way it is, and it would be nice to get up to speed with them and have that here as well. And I think in talking to Mr. Takash, that is their objective over the course of the next 2-3 years anyways, to get back up to that standard. I want to continue this conversation, kind of. But we really do need to wrap this up because we do have a meeting starting at 6:15, our finance committee. But I wanted to turn to the folks that are here once again and ask, is there anybody that has anything that they would like to add to what's being said here today? Any response to the conversation? Is there anybody here? Okay. And again, 3 minutes, and
I won't talk that long. My name is Diane Frolicker, 621 Grandview Way. Now, I know that our St. Croix EMTs will get an ambulance from River Falls, New Richmond. Will Stillwater call another community to get an ambulance if I need it? Or will he only call Stillwater ambulances and he's halfway to North St. Paul?
The answer is yes, they will. They have contracts, the same type of contracts for mutual aid.
So right now, you're willing to give the contract to Stillwater and put $100,000 into our 911 instead of giving that money to our EMTs.
No, what the difference is that money that is going to fund our current system, 100,000 of that instead would be going to help upgrade the communication system and save us.
I know you're saying it one way and I'm saying it another.
Well, it's money that's already going there.
Yeah.
That 100,000 is already going there.
To the EMT?
Right.
Or to 911, excuse me.
Well, no. To our, I see what you're saying.
Yes.
Okay, I get that.
Yeah.
That's money that I'm saying it's money that would be saved in what we're already spending on EMS. If we were to add it to the cost to upgrade for our EMS service, it would be an additional.
I'd like to ask, how many of you have had to call an ambulance, had to call 911 to get an ambulance to your home? How many? It was kind of nerve-wracking, wasn't it?
Absolutely.
Not to realize that maybe they're on another call. And how can I be sure that I would get an ambulance from another community if Stillwater or Lakeview is in the town?
Again, same thing. They have contracts with the exact same people that the St. Croix EMS does for mutual aid.
Well, I've been reading in the paper. This is my first meeting, so I'm sorry I'm behind times.
Not a problem.
But some of you, I don't know if you've made up your mind, but really, please keep the Hudson EMS.
Okay. Thank you. All right. Is there anyone else that had a comment? Again, keep it to the proposals that are in front of us.
Good evening, Dave Rucker, 34 Bridgewater Lane in Hudson. So my understanding of the purpose of government is to provide for the welfare of the people. So the $17 or $30, whatever it would be per capita or per person, is the cost of a meal out. I would gladly have that, spend that to keep the Hudson service community-based, have something that our youth can look forward to for jobs. The sense of community that the Hudson EMS brings to us is priceless. The other thing is, like, if you're holding your breath, you have to wait for an ambulance to come. How much would you pay for that ambulance to get here a minute sooner than later? The time that it takes the phone call to go from St. Croix EMS or St. Croix Dispatch over to St. Paul and Alina through phone lines and internet connections that are fallible versus having it at St. Croix County Dispatch seems like it would take up more time. That's all.
Okay, thank you. Anybody else? Anybody else? All right, committee. Yes, ma'am.
Can I say something?
Yes, please.
You're talking about response time here, and my son.
Oh, I'm sorry, your name and address?
My name is Donna May, and I'm new in Hudson.
Address, please?
Yep, pardon?
Address, please?
Address?
Yes.
North Hudson. I mean, North Glover.
Okay.
All right. I'm upset hearing about this response time. And my son had encephalitis, and he was convulsing. And I took him from the hospital. I called the ambulance service to take him to another hospital. And they came, and they weren't going to let me ride because it was against the rules, but they decided to let me ride. And people don't get over. People, I mean, ambulances can't fly. They can't, I mean, you know, I mean, there are so many variables for those guys. And then there's snow, and there's ice, and there's rain, and everything else. I'm sure they're getting there as damn fast as they can. And it upsets me that you're even questioning our guys about the response time.
Okay, thank you. Appreciate that. All right, anyone else? Okay, so obviously we did not get through what we needed to do today.
I think in part, I mean,
yeah.
we just got the numbers today from St. Croix EMS.
Right.
I mean, I don't know that, I personally don't feel like we're at a point of making a decision. I don't know what everybody else is thinking.
Here's what I'm thinking. My recommendation is we need to have a meeting where we're not going to run up against another meeting.
Right.
Yeah.
Yep.
I'd also like to suggest we maybe publish that one with more advance notice so we can draw input from more people. I want to make sure. I'm realizing, for example, that one thing I had wanted to say is an educated population is what we need. In my conversations, I'm learning that, you know, some people don't know that St. Croix EMS is a city department. They already think it's a private entity and that we're picking between two private entities because it's not called Hudson EMS. They're not equating with it, or they're not looking at it like the police department or the Hudson Fire Department. There's a perception among some people that it's private already, and that we're and that it's a company that's losing money and our money. So I don't know. I think an evening next meeting where we can have more people that are able to attend and listen and really learn and engage. I'd like to see more community engagement that we have been seeing.
Well, I don't know how we convince people to be here. Obviously, we've had 3 weeks between the last couple meetings, between the last meeting and this one. But okay, so
this one was postponed, or this meeting was supposed to be last week.
Right.
Yeah.
So 2-3 weeks ago. I guess we need to synchronize calendars again, and we're going into the evening, right? Start out and hammer it out.
So what time are we going to start? 6 o'clock?
6?
And we're talking a non-council evening.
Right, an evening where nobody has to get to another meeting. Good luck with that, huh?
Or a meeting you're willing to give up.
What?
How about 5 o'clock?
I think people need to get here from work.
We're going to be at it all night.
Yeah, I mean, I think I'm going to have probably some questions at the onset.
Yeah.
Yeah, so
I mean,
but 6 o'clock, I think, is a time that people can is a realistic time for
I
people
get
to
that, Joyce, but we're gonna be at it for probably 3-4 hours, and
Okay.
certainly people will have time to get here, after, we'll
Okay.
still be here. All right, so what are we looking at?
14th is the first night that I could.
I'm out 14th.
What day of the week is it?
You've got it or
that's
you don't?
Thursday.
I don't.
I don't have it
You
available.
wanted, I thought you wanted a little more time, but
Yeah.
Oh, right,
So-
for,
When was there 6 o'clock? And after
it's
available.
Wednesday, the 20th.
Not good.
Not
Pardon
good.
me?
Not good for me
Not
as
good.
well.
Not good? Okay, Friday, the 22nd.
Not good.
Friday.
Fridays are getting nuts.
No,
Monday, the 25th, there's
What's
no,
wrong with
no
Friday?
council
It's
meeting.
no different.
oh, that's no,
Than the day.
no, it is council
No,
meeting.
Monday, the 25th, we
Oh,
have a
that's
council
right,
meeting.
oh, that's right, I guess I
April
just don't have it
Fool's
on
Day.
here. Okay, then, so how's the 18th?
That's next week,
That's only
Monday.
a week.
That's plenty of time, isn't it, to get notice, especially for an evening meeting?
It's hard to say we can get more
Religious.
people in the community actually educated about, I'd like to get a better explanation into the paper, because I'm running into people who think that St. Croix EMS is a business. And they just need to understand in order to provide good public input.
You know what, and I get that, the people I'm running into are saying, when are you gonna get this thing resolved?
Sorry, what was your last date? Was it 20th or 18th?
18th.
I can make that work. Works for me.
I think it works for me.
All right, 20th, or 18th, rather?
There's not even time to put anything in the paper. I really want to hear from more people, and people who know, who are more
Rebecca?
educated.
Deadlines to get something in, yeah, Monday or the week before, so.
Pardon me?
Yeah, deadlines to get something in are Monday nights.
Yeah.
So tonight,
So
Okay.
it's like right now.
like right now, yeah.
Yeah, gone now.
Yeah, it's already over. It's already passed.
You're gonna get a story in the paper, aren't you?
Yes, but in terms of where a agenda is placed, it's in a different section.
How about headlines?
How about the 28th? A lot of people can get the paper on the 27th.
Is it a Thursday, Bill?
That's a Thursday.
I can do a Thursday.
Thursdays
that.
are tough for me.
can do
Let me look.
How are you guys?
Yeah,
28th, okay?
Thursday I
You
cannot
here too.
do.
Jerry, I'm looking at you, and,
I can't do 28th.
oh, all right, 28th is out.
27th?
27th I could do.
Everybody good on the 27th?
The only thing with 27th, that's a lot of churches are
Lent.
celebrating Lent on Wednesdays.
But we will be here for multiple hours, so I would just say on the other end of that. But I know what you're saying.
Yeah.
I know exactly what you're saying.
We gotta decide here quick, we got a meeting that was supposed to have started 5 minutes ago, or a few minutes ago, so.
26th? No, never
There's
mind.
also a,
I
Public
got a
Works.
village board meeting.
got a
All right.
bike advisory committee at 5:36, but that could probably be moved.
So 27th?
I can do that. I can make 27th work.
27th?
27th.
All right, let's do it, 5 o'clock,
Sounds good.
okay?
Thank
5
you.
o'clock.
Yeah,
There is a bike advisory committee meeting, 5:30.
probably in here, huh?
Can I
It
just,
doesn't have to be in here, but I'm part of that.
can I ask a question in terms of this evening's council meeting? We do have EMS on the agenda. Are we continuing that discussion?
I think that we should just postpone it, right? Do you think?
Unless there are people that, I don't, of course, there's no.
I think we need to have the public hearing because
Yeah.
people were told that there was one. Maybe
Well,
we
again,
just,
it's not a
maybe
public
we just
hearing,
don't
though, but
talk.
it's
It's not, that's
input.
just it, it's not a public hearing, it's,
Public
it
input.
was.
But it's
it was-
public input. I mean, if
Public
people-
input.
Correct,
people are
into-
making the effort to come.
Yeah.
I think we should
All right,
ask for the input.
well, that's fine.
Move to adjourn this.
Second?
Okay, motion is second to adjourn, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed, motion's approved, thank you.